Hey gang, so CitCon's done and I figured this would be a good time to pop in and go over what we saw at CitCon. This isn't going to be an in-depth analysis of each show, and the goal is to keep it short. The other goal here is to give broad strokes of what was in each panel so you can decide if it's one that you want to sit through or not. Because this project is so huge and our interests are so diverse, I'm sure I'll gloss over things that you care deeply about and talk about things that I care deeply about. But I'll try to capture as many of the big ticket themes of each panel as I can. So let's get this. Let's get the ball rolling. Day one started with, at heart, and I'll get into this a bit later, this felt a little bit like a sales brochure for Star Engine. That's not a bad thing. Again, I'll get into this later. This was one giant continuous spline. I think they said something like several billion miles. And it was pretty cool to watch as a backer. Sometimes it's real easy to get lost in the minutia and day-to-day of this project and realize just how far this project has come since that hangar module something like 8 years ago. We're going to go through the whole thing at high speed here, but the whole thing is worth a watch in real time if you get the chance. That right there, that's not just for us. And it's also not only for us and the devs who work on the project, who might be tucked away in a silo and not know the total scope of what they're working on. I also believe that this was aimed squarely at other game dev studios. You want to make a game, any game, check out Star Engine. So I'll put it this way. Imagine Baldur's Gate, but it comprises the entire world of Faerun, where you and your friends can join hundreds or maybe thousands of other players in a fully realized, beautiful fantasy world. Can you imagine it? Someone out there is right now, and they might now be looking at Star Engine to realize that dream. And that's kind of the dream for this project. A long time ago, I said that CIG would have to explore other streams of revenue. Selling a single $45 game package per player wasn't going to cut it. Eventually, everyone that wanted the game would have it, and then your revenue stream is gone. Ship sales were also kind of similarly problematic. Eventually, even a whale like me is going to look around and say, yeah, I got enough ships, and all these ships need crew, and I can only fly one at a time anyways, and they're going to stop buying new ships. And with all the ships being for sale in the game, you hit a wall there too. My thought was actually sell the tools CIG was developing for the engine. Back then, you probably couldn't sell the engine itself because it is CryEngine, which is already trademarked. But after the lawsuit and settlement with Crytek, it's possible Star Engine is now sufficiently different from the original code of CryEngine to be considered its own thing. I'll come back to this a bit later. But being able to sell the license for the engine to other developers, that is a revenue stream that would make the ship sales look like a fart in the whirlwind. Beyond that, this first presentation also had a live action demo of server meshing. Not a graph, not a concept image, an actual working demonstration of server meshing. For those who don't know, server meshing is the last of the really big technical hurdles that this project is facing. There are other things CIG is trying to do that are difficult, that have never been done before in any game, in fact, but getting server meshing to operate as a true MMO is probably one of the biggest. What's more, they did an amazing job of demonstrating what it is and explaining it in layman's terms. Definitely worth a watch, and what it means for this project can't be overstated. This is the last of the big pillars for this game. Once it's working, it begins to slam open that door that's been locked for so long. Content and game loops. Next up, we had... This one took a deep dive into resource management and showed the actual gameplay of how engineering roles would work. It also showed the impact of wear and tear on the systems and how engineers would basically be running around not only trying to manage power between all these systems, but also making sure that things are running at peak efficiency. In other words, if a component is wearing down, all the resource management in the world won't matter. Engineers are gonna have their hands full, particularly on the bigger ships, just keeping things from bursting into flames or flat out failing and leaving the ship dead in space. They went into the roles again, and it seems, at least on the surface, at least to this content creator, that the role of the manager will probably be best in the hands of an actual human being. The other roles should be able to be done by NPCs if you want to go that route. And I've said this before, but even if you have zero interest in Squadron 42 as a game, if nothing else, it's a demo of what NPC crews will be capable of, since nothing in that game is faked, in theory, and every single character outside of you, the single player, is an NPC. So NPC engineering crews should be a thing, but as always, it'll probably be way more efficient and cost efficient to have a fellow human being in that role. Just something to keep in mind. Even on small solo ships, it's sounding like upkeep will have a not insignificant role, and you'll be repairing components on the regular. And if you don't, you'll be replacing them. Could make the pirates out there a little more choosy in who they target, just saying. And you'll hear me say this over and over again, as it was the theme this CitCon, but we've heard this talk before. The difference this time is that we're actually getting to see it in the game. Worth the watch, particularly if you plan on running a multi-crew ship or you want to roleplay Scotty or LaForge. A lot of systems for keeping track of components and system nodes were shown off, as well as the incredible control the engineer control panel will have over the rest of the ship via a 3D interactable map of the ship. You'll have an item view where you can see all the nodes and the components, their health, but can also open and close doors, and I'm sure eventually vent whole rooms and sections of the ship remotely. You can see the state of the rooms on the ship to see if fires or other environmental hazards are present. So yeah, engineering will be a big loop for this game, no matter what you plan on doing. Cool one for sure. Moving on. So I said in my hot take vid that this one was a little weird and probably one of the weaker panels, which is surprising. At least it was to me. This one's usually an easy win for CIG. Talk about what ships you make, talk about the latest concept, talk about a popular ship or two on the drawing board, and you call it a day. It started pretty much as expected. They began by talking about the new A1, which, yeah, the Spirit is a sexy ship. And it goes to prove what Jared often says. While it sucks to have your ship delayed and last in line, they get better and better at making these ships each time they make one. This is one of those times when you definitely want your ship closer to the back of the line than the front. So the A1, pretty neat. Then we got the sales pitch for the next Dorito in the R-size lineup, the Zeus Mark II. Roughly freelancer size, it looks like, coming in 3 configurations. And real quick, I'm going to address a growing elephant in the room. I've seen a couple content creators talk about a hidden 4th variant, and I'm pretty sure this isn't the case. What that 4th ship in that picture is the one rocking the Concierge Solstice skin. It's not a variant, they're just showing off the alt paint job. Does that mean there will never be a 4th variant? Who can say, but I don't think CIG is revealing anything sneaky here, so sorry to pee on your Cheerios. All told, as I guess from the unannounced concept, this thing is roughly freelancer sized, if not a hair bigger, and it comes in 3 flavors, Explorer, Cargo, and Combat, with the Combat version, like the Antares, rocking both an EMP and a Quantum Snare. I have a feeling that might make a few tiny pirate orgs perk up their ears a little. It runs 135 for the Explorer and the Cargo variants, and 170 for the Combat version. If you want to use credit, it's a bit more at 150 and 190. They ended that chat stating that, like the Spirit, they wanted to be able to get out at least the Cargo variant by the end of the year, so Q4 2024. Pretty cool, and should play nice with the 2024 focus on RSI ships. Then they talked about the heavily leaked Cutter Scout. It's a pretty neat ship, and yeah, I grabbed a $5 CCU from the regular Cutter for my alt account. They showed off the backlog in a cleaner way than I've been showing off on my own vids, and then dove that into, well, talk about the Banu Merchantman. And it was mostly just to show off how much work they did on it before they stopped working on it 2 years ago. But I'm not bitter. But it was a little weird to show off the ship and then just drop the hammer and say, yeah, we haven't touched it since we stopped working on it because it's complicated, like we said last time. And we lost the people that were working on it. I mean, okay, yeah. We got that a year ago when you said that the first time. That said, I'm sure what this was about was John Crew and the devs that make the ships getting asked over and over and over again, because it's kind of a community meme at this point that BMM went. And while it's largely a rhetorical question, probably usually asked by someone doing it for the lols rather than because they actually care, I think it's also people just trying to keep the ship on the front burner. But it still sucked to see just how far the BMM made it before being abandoned. At least abandoned for the near term. I get why they did it, and I've had vids on this, but it was still a weird diversion from the regular ship talk. Then they talked about Squadron 42 and the ships that were prioritized for that project. For Idris owners, they confirmed the Idris, all variants, as well as the updated Vanduul ships, will drop into our hands when Squadron 42 drops. Which we knew, but it was good to hear it reiterated, as well as knowing that will happen when Squadron 42 drops and not after Squadron 42 drops. They mentioned the large RSI miner in passing and the fact that they'll probably bring it up in IAE in a month. And then they had this cool little concept vid of what I assume are all the ships currently in production right now. So we have the X1. Maybe a rework of the original Ursa. The long suspected and leaked MPUV variant that'll have either a mining or maybe a tractor beam attachment. Maybe the C1, but it looks like there's a cargo vader, so whatever the hell this is, a bigger Mirage ship maybe? Jian, but I don't think so. The Legionnaire boarding ship. The Zeus. The Tally rework or the gold standard pass of that ship. And of course the Polaris, which is what they ended the chat on. Looks like it's progressing nicely, and yeah, I've been saying this in my sprint watch, but I could see them possibly knocking out the Polaris by next year's IAE. Maybe. Possibly. They also confirmed the order finally for the RSI bigs. So the Galaxy's first, then the Perseus. And so I guess that kills my idea of the Perseus showing up in Squadron 42's second chapter. Moving on. Day one wrapped up with this panel on navigating the verse. This was another really, really strong showing by the CIG devs. This time showing off all the UI changes that'll be dropping into our hands shortly. And this time it sounds like soon really is soon, and not in the geological sense. On top of the bone mean being born here, this panel had a ton of cool features that will be a massive quality of life and usability improvement. They started off with the visor, again, live and in-game, with their new, cleaner layout. Just one thing I saw over and over again was me saying, oh yeah, so you just click that to make this thing happen. And that's not some statement on my brilliance at figuring these things out. That's a statement on how good the demoed UI was. It's intuitive, easy to read, and easy to figure out. Exactly what you want. This was a very information-dense presentation, and it's hard to bust it down to smaller parts, but I'll give it a shot. We began with a quick overview of the visor display, in a scenario where the player was tooling around Orison, doing a simple mission on the platform. UI gave me a strong cyberpunk vibe, and those who follow this channel know that's pretty high praise for me. It definitely had its own flavor though, which also isn't a bad thing. It seemed very intuitive and grounded in the game and the world, which is exactly what you want from good UI. Then they showed off the new mobiGlass, along with the promise that it would kind of work like an iPhone, with the ability to add and subtract apps from it. That's a pretty good quality of life and a pretty impressive feature in a video game. Imagine having cargo trading specific apps and combat specific apps, and being able to customize what you see based on your chosen game loop. Kind of one of those no-brainer things, but it also makes you pause and say, yeah, why hasn't another game done that yet? And to the topic of navigation, there were interactive maps that you could download onto your Mobi, but also your Mobi would create a map from your personal radar if no existing maps are available, or if the existing map was lacking critical updates. They were able to drop pins and share them with another player. As I've been hoping for and talking about for the last year or so on my sprint watches, the pins will have metadata, basically coordinates with a customizable name. Other players can rate these pins, and guess what that is? The first implementation of data running. You can sell that pin to another player along with a description of what they'll find there. So yeah, huge, huge stuff for this project. But wait, there's more. A carrot came in for a landing to pick up the dude, and the map shifted to a map of the carrot as the player moved aboard and onto the ship. one that was real similar to the one they showed off in the engineering demo. And that was deliberate. It was the same tech and unified the UI of both systems. So pretty damn slick. Then they took the demo a step further and backed out a step, showing off Crusader from the same map without a break. Now, once in the long ago, the Freelancer's radar used to work like this. You started at a radar view, but you could dynamically change the scale full out to the star map. It looks like they're bringing that back because that's exactly what they do here. And yeah, the whole map system is unified. The star map is the local map. You can just zoom in and out to the level of detail you want. Just, yeah, that's cool. It all seemed very slick and very fast. They had plans for a search feature as well as drop downs to look for a specific place and a back button. Just really good UI. I literally can't stress that enough. At the end of this talk, it sure seemed like they were saying this tech was not far off. I thought I heard 322, but do not quote me on that. That would be year end, and while the demo was impressive, there were a couple things I saw that would probably need to be polished up before release. At a guess though, Q1 of next year, maybe at the latest. If 322 really is the UI and quality of life patch, we might be getting this in our hands a lot sooner than we think. Maybe. This one was mostly a demo of the new character creator, along with the elements that will be brought in to make an already impressive Star Citizen character even more impressive. They started with a quick shot of the clothing styles we expect to see, and how they'll change from system to system based on how civilized they are and who their influences are. So one of the things I'm loving about 321 is the fact that I can now carry a pistol or multi-tool in my pants. So I can actually do things in my clothing rather than always having to wear armor. I mean, I get that it's not really a big deal for most players, but for the RPers out there, it's kind of a big deal. But what's more, they showed off the fact that we could start adding these little cargo patches to our clothing, suddenly giving them a ton more utility. And while the holding capacity was about as small as you could expect, you could carry about 10 of the things, so that was rad. Yeah, rad. I said it. They then bounced over to the new gangs that we've been hearing about on the progress tracker, so we can start putting faces and styles to their names. Rough and Ready, Headhunters, and Dusters. Yeah, we got more info on them, but mostly in a cosmetic sense, this being the character teams. For Rough and Ready, they dipped their toes into reputation advancement. So members of this gang are kind of like the Yakuza in the sense that the number and complexity of their tattoos give an indication of their given rank in that gang. Then it was dropped that players could also enter this hierarchy in the game. So not only can you rank with this faction, but that rank will literally be etched into the skin of your toon. Immediately, you could see that as a good thing or bad. And much like the Crips and Bloods, it's great if you're wearing gang colors among your gang, but maybe less great if you're in the presence of another rival gang. Or the cops. Then they pushed on to hygiene and talked about how it'll stack. You could go full pigpen on this, and I'm sure some players will see just how far they can take this. But by and large, it sounds like NPCs will have negative reaction to those that don't put at least a little bit of effort into hygiene. It'll also apparently make you more susceptible to infections. We've seen this sort of thing in various survival games, so yeah, that tracks. Anyways, they also showed off sweating, crying, and bleeding. Just crazy stuff. Sean Tracy popped up, talked about Starcloth, and yeah, you could almost feel the trademark on that term when he said it. Again, more tools that can be licensed off to other game developers as the thing gets polished up. Pretty slick, worth the watch, look pretty cool. I think it'll fall under a category like sound or lighting, not something you'll really notice until you drop into another game that doesn't have it. At least doesn't have it to the same quality level. Then we got to see Star Hair. Again, feel that trademark. Again, very cool stuff. Best hair I've seen in a game. And while on stream, I said, this is something you can make actual movies with, and I'll stand by that. These characters are starting to hit the fidelity that you'd expect to see in a Hollywood movie. A movie, not a video game. Certainly not a massively multiplayer game. I'll come back to that eventually, but after a lot of talk about how they pulled it off, Sean came back up, demoed the new character creator, which you're watching here. Just wow. They've added a lot more heads, a lot more skin colors, options for the hair colors and makeup, the whole bit. They did say, or strongly suggest, that at least some of this will be in our hands for 322. So by the end of the year, I think it was only the hair, but even that would be an improvement. Maybe. Possibly. We'll see. No word on if you'd be able to actually save the hex code for a character you made, and no word on different body types. But all in all, a giant leap forward for the character creator. Oh, and they showed off beards. And things got a little weird. And then having these two back to back was a good choice, as it made a lot of sense to go through the process of character creation and then drop right into how that character would interact with the game world around them. Yen's got a kicking with the new EVA, which was quite a step up from last year's demo. And yeah, in-game demo. No more white box. Very polished, very Iron Man-y. As hoped, this one was about the traversals and new character animations. New prone was up next, and they showed it off, along with the new ladder movements. Again, no mock-ups, all in-game. And you can just see the applications here. Not just in Star Citizen, but in any number of other games that might want to eventually use Star Engine. You're starting to see the theme, I'm guessing. Power sliding to cover, and then they showed a demo of sneaking up on an NPC and the ability to break out of that slide and interact into other traversals and actions, like attacking or sprinting. From there, they poked into the actor status system, telling us a bit of radiation and how it could be occluded by line of sight, which, again, pretty cool attention to detail. The new interaction prompts are up next, kind of going hand in hand with the new UI. Not 100% sure on this one, as it seemed like they wanted to go from interaction clicks to an interaction wheel. So if an object has one action, like pick up, that's the only thing it does. So you just click F and it picks it up. If there's several actions you can do to it, like store, equip, and carry, then you can select it from the radial menu. What's more is that it will begin to categorize the items that you interact with and apply that default action to other items in that category. It did seem a little clunky, at least to me, but I might change my opinion on that once it's actually in my hands. And sure enough, they went to the pushing buttons animation, where your tune will actually reach out and do the thing once you click a button. Neat effect, and it'll help with immersion for sure. Obviously, this will let them make puzzles and gameplay situations revolving around these interactions. I mean, again, these are all in-game demonstrations, not mock-ups. They spun that into a new looting UI, and yeah, way better and smoother. Plus, you could reload your weapon from your backpack, although it did take a lot longer. But not as long as opening up inventory, clicking on your ammo, moving it to an ammo location on your tune, closing inventory, and then reloading your weapon. And then they shifted it back to Jan's, and he showed off a little bit of the built-in skill system. They showed takedowns and how you can become better and better and faster at them the more you use them. Honestly, I prefer this to other types of artificial skill trees. So if a game's going to have a skill development system, this is the one to have, at least for me. This then bounced over to restraints, then weapon wear and tear, then just sprucing up how the weapons felt and were differentiated from one another. They finished it off with the new HUD, MFDs, quantum trouble. So yeah, worth the watch. As you can tell, while this was all technically in the same wheelhouse, it was also kind of all over the place in the places where it touched the game. Best I can say in summary is, once CIG dumps the raw vid on us, give it a watch, because this is how interacting with every element in this game is going to be moving forward. And a pretty loaded morning went right into... So right off the bat, people got triggered over Yogi's pride flag because Twitch chat is going to be Twitch chat, but the panel got rolling pretty quick. They went right into physicalized buttons in the cockpit. From what I understand, shortcut and bound keys will still work. They'll just initiate the animation of the character reaching out and stabbing a button or flipping a switch in lieu of you doing interaction mode and clicking the button that way. It's just going to make flying a lot more tactile and immersive. From here, we got to see the new UI, both the HUD and the MFDs. In this case, it was Aegis, but they've been saying for a while that each manufacturer will have their own style, something that's only possible because of building blocks. See, that tech all builds on each other, which is cool, but it also means that the development cycle sometimes has to wait. They rolled this into the master modes and the indicators, which seem small, but I'm sure in time it'll probably be second nature. They still seem to like the light blue and white motif, so it could be an issue when trying to tell if something is really on or off. We've seen master modes before, we even have them in the PTU, but not in a live environment and demo mode, keeping the theme for this CitCon. It wasn't theoretical or white box. Then they touched on how they're using AI to learn from us, and then utilizing that to inform how the AI flies in response. So that's a little scary. And then they showed off different AI fighting styles in actual combat with a player. This moved to Yogi explaining how weapon and aiming systems would work. Well, he kind of sketched it out at least. It was obvious some was being held back for Squadron 42, or maybe that the work on the balancing was still a work in the progress, bringing a little bit from the theme of the CitCon. Pretty cool show, particularly if you're a dogfighter or a fan of PvE or PvP, honestly. Finally, they wrapped it up with some demonstrations of the new atmospheric flight model, and yeah, it looked pretty good. Then it was off to lunch, where I ate an entire bag of dicks. Back from lunch, we fired up this one. I had been thinking this would be the narrative team, because honestly, nothing else in the show had been, and we almost always hear from the narrative team at CitCon. Instead, it was the mission team and the level designers, and this one took a huge diversion from where I thought it was going in my preview. So the mission team first had a bit of a refresher of how they design missions from the ground up, usually with raw sketches and storyboards. Then up to white box, then up to textured and realized in game. Finally, that's checked against the original goals, all pretty standard mission game design stuff. Then they kind of rehash things that they've covered in the past, like level design, alternate routes, signposts, that sort of thing. And then they started getting into the next step up. Settlements. And this is what I was waiting for. Locations that aren't just a trade post or a bunker, but actual locations you can visit, go to a variety of stores, and maybe stay for a day or three. Combined with resource management, which they said will be in effect at each of these locations, The hope is that they really do feel like living, breathing locations, the kind of thing you might find in, say, Skyrim. It just gives these locations more variety, and they really start to feel like a frontier town rather than just a resource node you stop at as quickly as possible so you can pop over to the next resource node. One cool thing they mentioned was that this would apply to outlaw communities as well. They would still have the resource nodes to sustain that outpost, even if they were criminal in nature. So they'd still have to generate power, food, refine stuff, and so on. It's just cool to see the derelict outposts that were more than just a rundown defensive structure in the middle of nowhere. They talked about themes, but we've seen variations of this talk in the past. Granted, it's cool to see it in-game, but the theories behind it are pretty well understood by the community at this point. From here, they bounced over to talking about the pyro stations. We've seen a lot of these in sneak peek images and even piecemeal in various shows and various levels of white box, but again, it stuck to the theme. It was in-engine, which is quite a change from last year. And they did this fly-through of the whole station together. The whole theme of this year's CitCon was an overwhelming sense of closeness, that these things were actually coming soon, as in within the next year, as opposed to soon and dropping into our hands at some nebulous point in future date. Pretty solid, if only just to see these things in the engine. Other than that, it's content that we've seen before in other shows, although granted not at this level of polish. Then Jared did his contractual rip on Salty Mike.
And Salty Mike, don't forget to pick up your check on the way out.
Nice.
You know, that joke is so old, we would never, ever pay him.
And we rolled into. So this one went real hard at the new underground that we saw white box last year. We'd seen a lot of this in concept, but yeah, you already know the theme by now. These locations look to be kind of like arcologies, basically microcities unto themselves, and will basically be a big-ass content generator in a box. Trade, infiltration missions, theft, and even full-on invasions are in the cards for this ginormous bunker and setting, and I'm all here for it. These things have come a long ways in the last year. They even showed off some puzzles they could implement into the native design of the location. So yeah, cool stuff here too. While the frontier towns are more my speed, these beefy, modern corporate outposts also have a place in the verse, and I'm here for it. Then we went from big facilities to freight elevators. And for people who've followed this channel for a bit, you know this kind of thing is my whole bag. I've been talking about how these freight elevators would change the game entirely moving forward. Thankfully, CIG didn't make a liar out of me. They started with a blink and miss it mention of a transport guild, moved on to cargo types, including a few that we haven't seen in the verse yet, and then pushed right onto the freight elevators. Basically, they confirmed the things I've been speculating about for at least the last year or so. Freight elevators, in addition to being the way you'll manually load and unload cargo from your ship, will also now be how you access items in your local inventory, including ground vehicles. And then the surprise move of the night: land claims and base building. If that's keeping with the theme of the whole show, it means that it's on its way sooner rather than later, with work beginning in 2024. And I'll just let you watch this because it's kind of cool. So yeah, base building. Maybe not landing in our hands before the end of next year, but maybe not too much further out. Maybe. Possibly. But I just wanted to point something out right about here. Now, I know I've been saying that there pretty much has to be a flatbed version of the Atlas platform, so the same chassis that forms the Spartan, Centurion, and Ballista will look right here. So yeah, that's in the cards too. But back to bases, everything in the game is created from a blueprint, which is made from, well, stuff. Mined titanium, refined ore, components like computer parts. You get the idea. And you can get these blueprints by having a good rep with a faction, completing certain missions, or I guess finding them with rare shopkeepers. Bases will be balanced out by their location, so the player built bases will. With bases built in safe areas, having good local protection but high taxes, giving a lower return on your investment. On the flip side, you can go with no local security, but a higher return. And in the middle, well, you can figure that out for yourself. So risk reward. That said, the Carnival will still lay down our roots in the Goth system, a system that's kind of in between those two. They went into the types of buildings we could have, and they fell into the usual suspects. Producers that produce a commodity with resources, defense that protects that base, and habitation. And then Chris closed it out. Now I have a lot planned I can say about this closer, but the short version follows. CR said that Squadron 42, as I've been guessing for a while now, was now feature complete. And that means it's likely dropping at the end of next year, although he left himself some wiggle room without dropping an actual date. But for just a second here, and I'll do this in a later vid too, I want to compare Chris Roberts to Todd Howard for a sec. Squadron 42 and Star Citizen is a culmination of CR's whole career as a game designer. This has likely been his dream for the better part of 4 decades. Like a lot of us who picked up Wing Commander or Privateer for the first time in the 90s, this is what it was building to. And there's a reason why CR gets a little emotional here. And also why people like myself and Salty Mike and maybe a few other content creators also get a little emotional. Just compare Chris here.
You're making me very emotional now. Thank you so much. It's been definitely a long time coming. We're, as you can see on that video, that's Squadron 42 gameplay. So we are really dialing it in and polishing it, and we're really proud of what it is.
To Todd Howard here.
That come here for the biggest convention in gaming to celebrate games, and I figured, it is our first new franchise in over 25 years. So if I was going to come, it's for Starfield.
Well, we all welcome you to Gamescom in Germany, and we're all very excited to step into this new world, Starfield, and the next week, early access. Set up for people, why did you want to make this game, Starfield? Why did you want to create a new world?
I think like a lot of gamers out there, we have dreamt of a game where we look to the skies and we can blast off into space and explore. We love to make games where we can explore these worlds. We've done like with the Elder Scrolls and the Fallout series, but we wanted to do something brand new where you could explore with complete freedom in the galaxy. It's a game we've always wanted to play that we think a lot of people wanted to play as well. It's kind of that dream game.
Quite a difference, yeah? One's clearly a passion project, and the other, it just kind of feels like a paycheck. Being able to spot the difference between those two is important, and it leads to a different quality and desire to see the thing through. And yeah, there might be delays because when you're dealing with your dream, you want it to be perfect. You want it to match the vision in your head. I'll have more to say about this in another vid, but let's leave this one here. For the first time since the Kickstarter, this thing feels like it's turning a crucial corner. Seeing server meshing actually working in a live environment hearing that Squadron 42 is feature complete. There may be more speed bumps ahead. There almost certainly will be. There are going to be setbacks, delays, you name it. But more and more, this is feeling like a snowball that's starting to roll down a mountain, rather than a Sisyphusian boulder being pushed up it. And that's all I have for this one, gang. Check out the vids as CIG drops them, and they're all worth a watch if you have the time. Catch me next time.